Então, estamos começando mais uma entrevista do Trampo Musical, uma revista do GCult, do Grupo de Estudos em Cultura, Trabalho e Educação. Hoje, os nossos debatedores sou eu, Luciana, Requião, Hudson, Lima e o Pedro Aune, e vamos entrevistar o John Acosta. Ele vai se apresentar já para a gente. Então, sem mais delongas, John, por favor.
Gracias. I'm going to say in English. Is that okay?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay. My name is John Acosta. I am the past president of the Musicians Union in Los Angeles. I was elected for 3 terms. Each term is 2 years. And I was also the vice president for 3 terms. So 12 years as vice president, president. And also before that, I was a representative for the union. Can you hear me okay? Because there's somebody cutting the grass in the background. Okay, good. I also am on the national board of the Musicians Union. Each city, like Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, San Francisco, all the cities have a chapter or a locale of the union for the musicians, which is kind of very independent. And then we have an international union, which is all the United States and Canada. And I'm on the junta directiva or executive board of that international union. I'm also a musician, guitar player from New York City. And I started out doing hip hop music, and then I went to California and I started doing alternative rock and roll. And I was a session player, and now I do a lot of composing for TV. So that's my story.
Entonces, uma pergunta muito ampla sobre a história do sindicato em USA. É um sindicato para todo o país? Como se estrutura? Quando começou?
So the union started in very early in late 1800s, 1890. We started having unions in the United States, mainly in the East Coast near New York City. And it was a lot of the traveling musicians who were doing opera. Also, there was a style of music that was we used to call it minstrel music, which was almost a mixture of the Black culture and the European culture, but it was very like entertainment for poor people or working class people. And those musicians who were doing the music for these shows wanted to start to unionize because they were competing with each other for the prices. One group would charge, $10, and then the other group would say, "Oh, we're going to charge $5." And so it was like a race to the bottom that they were having. So they said, "Hey, we need to get together and agree on the prices together so that they're not taking advantage of us by bringing you in, and then we're not competing with you." So that started independent, like in New York City. You had a little bit of that activity in Los Angeles, also in San Francisco, wherever these cities were starting to form and musical shows were coming through. So the union started as a local type of movement in the late 1800s. And then towards the end of 1890, that's when the federation, they started discussing making it a national union in the United States. But it was mainly for traveling musicians, for like opera traveling shows or minstrel shows, which were like a mixture of African-American, Black culture and European culture. But only the white musicians were the ones who were organizing. The Black musicians, they were not included in this organizing in the very beginning. They were outside of it.
Sobre as diferenças entre as musicians unions, lá musicians unions in one state of the United States is one. For example, the Musicians Union in California and the Musicians Union in Boston são há semelhanças entre elas?
Yes. There's similarities because today the similarities is that it's all together under one federation. So they all agree that we are part of this federation. But also a lot of the contracts where they negotiate with the opera or the symphony, they have very similar structure in the contract. So there's certain norms that, we have a pension fund, a retirement fund for musicians who work so they can retire. It's the same pension for Boston, New York, Los Angeles. So they have some similarities. But where the biggest similarity, the more similar things are for recording, the international union will be the one who negotiates and makes the price, the rates for all recording. So if you work for Warner Brothers in New York, or you work in Warner Brothers for Los Angeles, or you work for Warner Brothers in Nashville, you will get the same pay, because the international union says, okay, we have one rate for recording. If you work for Warner Brothers, it's going to be, $300 in New York, or $300 in Nashville, or $300. So they can't say, oh, we're going to go to Nashville because it's $100. It's cheaper. It has to be even. So that's one thing where the similarities. In some cases, you may have differences. So let's say in California, the weather is very hot. So maybe in our contract, we will have more language about, when it's very hot in the sun and we have to take a break and they have to cover the stage. Certain things in the workplace, conditions of the working will be different in California than, say, in Boston, where it's very cold. Maybe they're going to say, okay, after 30 degrees Fahrenheit or 40 degrees Fahrenheit, you cancel the show. So there will be some differences, but there also a lot of things will also be very similar. So
I would like to ask you to talk a little bit more about the role of the union, and how does it act as a whole in the context of the musical labor. And also, one thing that I'm very curious about is how can the union enforce its decisions? Which tools does it have to make sure that the people will be paying the amount that it's determined, or even all these other rules? How can they make those things really happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. In the United States, we have laws that are that affect the workers, labor laws that allow the workers to make a union, to create a union, and these laws go back to 1940s, 1950s, all the way up. There have been different changes, but those laws for the musicians, for the actors, for the truck driver, for the teachers, for the nurses, they're very strong laws for workers to make a union and then to be recognized by the law as a representative of the workers. So it gives the union a very strong position in society. Even though now in 1940 the union was more stronger, now it's weak. It's very weak because you have a lot of governments who come in and take away the power of the union. When you have a right-wing government, like when you have Bolsonaro and we have Trump, it's like to the union, so they take away a lot of power. So, but the role of the union now, with the law the way it is, the union has the authority in most of the United States, New York, California, most of the states that are usually more democratic states. The union is very strong because the laws of the state and are very pro-union. So New York, California, we have strong laws that help the union, where in Texas, it's a right-wing state. The laws are very weak for the union has to work a lot harder and have to be, it's a more dangerous place for the union. It's more difficult environment in Texas, in New York. So in New York or California, where the union can negotiate contracts with Warner Brothers, Universal, Capitol Records, Sony Records, all the big companies, the union has a contract that they will negotiate every 3 years or every 5 years, and they will come up with how much the musicians will be paid, how much pension money they will get for retirement, I think you call it pensión. Oh no, you guys call it jubilación in Portuguese, something like that.
Aposentadoria. Aposentadoria.
Oh wow, totally different than Spanish. So they have this retirement fund. They also have a royalties fund. So if I work on a recording for Bruno Mars, let's say, once the recording, they pay me for the recording. Every year I will get royalties, more money, depending on if it's used in a movie or if used in TV, like depending how the song continues to be used. The union is the one who negotiates those. The record company didn't say, oh, we feel very generous, we're going to give you royalties, we're going to give you this. Everything that's good for the musician, the union had to fight for it, had to go after the company, and because the company will always want to keep more money in their pocket. So we have royalties, we have a pension fund, we have also medical insurance, obra social. I don't know how you say it in Portuguese, but it's like a health insurance. So if you get sick, you need to go to the doctor. So the union negotiates.
Em português é plano de saúde.
Plano de saúde. So yeah, so the union also has that. So in our contracts, we set out, we have with the record companies, we have a contract that's maybe, I don't know, maybe 200 pages long, and inside it has all these things about if the song goes in a movie, what happens if the song goes to TV, if they use the song in the live show. Have to pay the pension. If I'm an arranger or I'm an orchestrator on a record, how much I get paid, what my royalties will be, and all these different things are in the contract. So the role of the union is in our law to be able to negotiate these contracts to make the musicians be able to make more money, to give them better conditions to be able to support themselves, to live a decent life and have medical insurance and when you turn 80 years old, have a retirement fund so you can still make money even though you can't work anymore. So the role of the union is to be an advocate, but the way the union enforces it is if it's like if Warner Brothers, which will happen, let's say they hire Hudson to make to work on Bruno Mars' album. But and they say, Hudson, you go to the session Saturday. Hudson's in the session all day Saturday. He records all these different music parts, and then they don't pay him anything. And Hudson is sitting there waiting 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. Finally, he's like, oh man, I need to get my money. It's 6 months already. So let's say he calls the union and he says, oh, I work for Warner Brothers and I haven't gotten paid. We will call the company, and because we have the contract, we would tell them, hey, 6 months, now you have to pay penalty, you have to pay the late fees. And if the record company will say, oh, we don't know anything about Hudson. We don't know what happened with Hudson. Like, this bullshit. They will always find a way to not pay or pay late. But once we show the proof, no, he recorded, and they go, oh, okay, we owe the money. And then we negotiate maybe the penalty is $1,000. We say, okay, paid tomorrow, it's $500. Like we will negotiate, or we say, no, you have to pay everything. But if the record company, Warner Brothers, continues not to pay and take more time, then the union can use the law and file a lawsuit. We have you can look and Google this, but in 2010, we sued American Idol, the TV show in the United States, because they owed $500,000 to the musicians on the show because they were not paying the royalties for like 1 year, 2 years. And we're like, hey, you have to pay the royalties. They're like, oh, yeah, we pay. And they kept pushing it out. And then they said, oh, we don't think we have to pay because they made up some bogus thing in the contract. So then we had to file a lawsuit, and it was in the news and the press and everything. And then they say, oh, what happened? Why you put it in the press? We're like, well, we warned you, you have to pay. So then we negotiated, and they paid the musicians. But that's the role of the union in making the contract, and then when they don't pay, making them pay, through litigation, through the law.
Another thing that makes me very curious is how the new configuration of the recording market can affect this kind of structure. Meaning, with all the home studios and small studios and being the production kind of more pulverized, more than it used to be. Does it makes harder to the union to exert that kind of control in this kind of situation?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, the truth is now, not only because you can record in your house and everybody's recording all over the world, it makes it harder for the union, but also a lot of the recordings and the records that are being released are independent records. So they're not with Universal or Sony or Warner Brothers. And so when there's no contract, if it's an independent record company or even just a self-release, an independent record company, the union has no authority or no legal claim or right to pursue the record company because there's no contract. And a lot of artists, a lot of new musicians or young musicians who are working independent, they don't know about the union because they're not working for Sony or Columbia or Warner Brothers. So it makes it difficult because the musicians don't see the union, they don't know the union. So if you talk to somebody who's 20 years old, they probably never heard of the union. You know, only if they worked for one of the big companies and they got a payment through the union. So it makes it really difficult, and it makes what the union is calls, or it requires that the union does more organizing, more outreach. You know, do more contact with the musicians who are not in the union, which is also difficult because you need people and time to go to to the music festivals, to the schools, to communicate to the young musicians about why the union is important. It makes it much more difficult, especially now. In 1940, 1950, I think the United States union percentage of workers was very high. It was like almost 50%, let's say, of all the workers in the United States were in the union. Now it's less than 8% in the United States. So the union has lost a lot of influence. So, and what happens is we have a small sector that is very much unionized, like movies, television. It's a very strong union activity. But then, tours all around the United States are not part of the union. Live shows and all the nightclubs are not part of the union. So we lose a lot of ground where before everything was union. Now it's like very small. And so this is a big challenge now, and something the union is struggling with, because we know, like, if we don't change, then we're just going to go down to where it's just going to be the orchestras and some recording, and everything else is going to be, no union, everything like cowboys, the cowboys, Wild Wild West.
Oh, John, uma coisa que eu não compreendi perfeitamente é por que hoje essas pessoas que tocam em nightclubs, esse tipo de coisas estão fora. Porque acá no Brasil temos muita informalidade, não há contratos formalizados, sobretudo em música em vivo. Então, situações como essas sucedem também nos Estados Unidos. É por esse motivo que não há uma relação mais direta com músicos e sindicato, ou não? Há contratos formalizados, mas mesmo assim não há interesse em estar em sindicato.
No, look, what happened was that from 1940 through 1980, everything was union. So if you played in a little jazz club here in Los Angeles, or you played in a church, mostly in church in New York, or you played at a concert, like everything was always in the union contract. The employers all had union contract. There was a lawsuit, a big legal fight in 1970 that took maybe 5 years in the court, and it went to the Supreme Court almost. It went very high in the courts because it was a band leader who was performing at the Hilton Hotel. I think it was in Puerto Rico, actually. What happened was they had a Hilton Hotel, and they had a contract with the union. and one of the musicians was injured on the job or something happened, and he tried to sue to the hotel, and the hotel said, "Oh no, we're not your patron, we're not your employer. The band leader is the employer, the guy who formed the band." And the court, and after 5 years of lawsuits, the court said, "You know, that's right. Yeah, the hotel is not the employer anymore. It's the band leader." And then all throughout the United States, all of the nightclubs, we lost everything. And that was like almost the most income and activity was that work. It all overnight, it just went away. And it was around 1980, so Ronald Reagan was president. We had a very right-wing government, and so that pushed a lot of anti-union activity.
Como estão lidando com os direitos de autor, com essa coisa de streaming, de Spotify? Como está essa coisa?
En el lado de músicos, porque, or speaking Spanish, in the side of musicians, in our contracts with the record companies, with the major companies, we have a streaming royalty that we negotiated into the contract. Statutory, like government mandate for streaming royalties, we don't have that for musicians. We don't have anything that the government says you have to pay. So right now, the only thing we have in the United States is in the union contract, which helps union musicians and it helps non-union, because if you work for Warner Brothers, but you're not in the union, you would still get the money, even though you're not a member of the union. But where, I guess, so that area is only in the contract. The danger is that if we lose it in the contract, we don't have the government supporting anything, so we lose everything. And there's always a possibility in the negotiation that the studio or the record companies will say, we want to reduce the amount that we pay, or we want to pay nothing. So because other countries, I think in the United Kingdom, in Europe, and in Europe in general, they're creating laws where the government is mandating payments. I know in the United Kingdom, they have something similar where the musicians will get paid for streaming performances. So even if it's not in the contract, they have it in the law, which is, I think, a better, because it's harder to change the law, I think. But and then for composers here in the United States, this is something different, because there's a different union for writers of, songwriters and composers. They are really fighting hard not to get anything, because the money the composers are making for regular television and regular movies was very good, and for streaming now is very low. So a lot of them are saying they can't even survive on streaming, on the streaming money. For streaming television and movies, we are still getting a very small amount in royalties for music, very small. And TV was always a lot of money, and now we're like, so also a lot of musicians are struggling. If you only work in Netflix or Amazon or Hulu, in the streaming, you have to make more money in advance, make them pay you more upfront, because the royalties will be very small after you make the recording.
John, yo tengo una pregunta sobre la inteligência artificial. Como tu pensa sobre isso para os músicos, para o futuro, para a interferência em la profissão da música?
Good question. Here in the U.S., the majority of the concern with artificial intelligence is the composers and the songwriters are very worried about it more than the musicians. Like, we have not really felt that we will be replaced yet by artificial intelligence like a band. But the musicians who are composers are really worried, because they see now that the artificial intelligence is writing the songs. Or I can go to the artificial intelligence and say, write something like the Beatles, Rolling Stones, and Led Zeppelin, and then it's going to write a song, and then I'm just going to put my name on it. I think a lot of people are worried. So just this week, actually, I just was reading today that ASCAP, which is the songwriters union in the United States, one of the biggest, they are starting to make recommendations for the law, for the government, to create protections around using artificial intelligence to replace songwriters and composers, or to copy songs or compositions, like how to protect the intellectual property of the humans from the computers. So they're starting that now. It's a very interesting time, and it's every week is something new. It's changing, but there's a lot of fear in the songwriting and composers community. The musicians, we haven't really started talking about that yet. What we are more concerned with now, as the musicians union, is the replacement of musicians in a live show with electronics. There's a new software called Keycom, key like Key com, COM, that is now replacing orchestras in Broadway shows, where you can have maybe a 20-piece orchestra. Now you can only have 4 musicians, and then you can have this machine will take over like 10 to 15 musician jobs, and it will play with the musicians, with the orchestra, almost like it's a live orchestra. The conductor will just change the tempo and everything slows down and it goes up, and supposedly it sounds really good, like almost like the like live music. So that was what we're more worried about in the musicians union, not artificial intelligence, not yet.
Essa coisa de inteligência artificial me parece que não é uma preocupação tão grande hoje como deveria, porque parece que está cambiando a forma de consumir música muito rápido. Mas a outra pergunta podem os músicos viver dessa música? Notas algum câmbio no perfil dos músicos que ganhavam a vida tocando violoncelo como o Hudson e agora são professores e técnicos e outras coisas, não só na música, mas em outras áreas? Como tu vês isso?
Well, a lot of musicians, professional musicians, they have a very like a mixed type of employment. So they do a little bit of teaching. So they have students. Then they have some will have a position in the university. It would be like the dean or I guess the dean or the prince or the head of a music department. And they will be a studio musician, or they will also be an orchestra. There's very few musicians who are only doing studio music only. There's not maybe in Los Angeles, there's maybe 200 people in Los Angeles who maybe only do recording. That's all they do, movies, TV, and they can live a good life, and they have a nice house, and they do very well, but it's only 200 people, let's say, approximately. Then the other, let's say, 800 people who work in recording, in the orchestra, in the nightclubs, that are working maybe that make enough money from music to live a life, a good secure life with a secure income. They're doing recording, they're doing Broadway shows. So maybe during the daytime, they will do 1 session or 2 sessions. They will go home, and then at night they will go to the opera and perform with opera. So maybe in 1 week they would do, recording, they would do opera, they have 1 student or 2 students, and they put all these things together, and then they make a good income that way. But let's say that's 1,000 people who are making it work. There's another, 7,000 or 8,000 in Los Angeles who may do 1 session a month, 1 session every 2 weeks. They also teach music. Maybe they have a wife or husband who has a good job, so that they, between the couple, they can have a good income. But there are a lot of musicians who work sporadically, 1 job here, 1 job here, who cannot only live by just playing the instrument. They have to do a lot of things, and a lot of it might not just be music. They may work in a I don't know, music store, or a lot of the ones who are very serious about music, you will see them more with a position in a university or a music school, a music program, or they have a lot of students. But you don't really see the professional musicians like working at the I don't know, at the gas station or the supermarket. You know, you don't see that too much.
I wanted to ask, what are the strategies that the union is trying to adopt in order to increase the influence and the power of action in the struggle between the musicians and the employees and with the for what I heard, seems to me that the government have a very central role in all of this. And so how can the union also try to change the laws in order to assure the protection of the worker?
No, it's a good question. What what the union is doing is looking at different campaigns to organize musicians who maybe are not in the union. So, for instance, there's one campaign called Fair Trade Music, where it's around live shows around the United States. They're trying to organize musicians around a certain nightclub or a certain festival, and little by little getting the musicians to support the union, to agree that by having a union contract, they will have better pay, better terms and conditions. They will have better support. And so the union is organizing around what we call issues organizing or issues-based organizing. So if you go to a music festival, you try and find out what are the problems in the festival. And you have someone, an organizer, who talks to the musicians, a lot of one-on-one conversations, a lot of drinking a cup of coffee or drinking a beer, and finding out what the problems are. Maybe the festival pays late. They take a long time to pay. Maybe the musicians are not getting enough breaks. Maybe it's very dangerous in the festival, not enough security. So they find the issues, and then they organize the musicians about, well, if you have a union contract, we can make sure that they pay you on time. If they don't pay you, then we have penalties. Or we have a union contract, we can negotiate better security for you when you're doing the show, or when you have to store your instruments so they don't get stolen, things like that. And so this Fair Trade Music campaign is almost like a grassroots organic organizing of independent musicians around the issues that affect them in different places. So that is one strategy. Whether it's going to be successful, we don't know, because it's just beginning now. They're starting to put more resources and more energy into this campaign. There's another campaign that they're trying to do, organizing in the movies and television music, and trying to get more musicians to support the union to improve the contract, to make more money in streaming. The problem with that strategy, in my opinion, is that the community of musicians who's doing the film and TV work is very small. That's union, and there's a lot of more musicians who are not in the union, who are doing the same work, who they're not interested in talking to them. They're only talking to the people here. And so I feel like the campaign is going to be weak, because you need to have these people involved. And these people who are out here, they're not in the union. They don't care about the union. And many of them see the union as very antique, very old and bureaucratic. And so they think they don't trust the union. And I think the strategy needs to be, okay, we need to organize all these people, even though they're not even paying, they're not giving the union money or doing anything with the union now. We need to bring them in and then make them part of something. But we'll see. And also in my opinion, I think the union is very closed to Black people and Latinos. In the United States, or in Los Angeles, we did a survey of all of the musicians in the union, and we had maybe, let's say, 6,000 members. Only 8% of the 6,000 was Latino, African American, and Asian. only around 8%. So 92% was white, 92, or let's say even 90%, and 10% African American and all this stuff. So you're telling me that when you go to see the Grammys, you only see 10% Black people or Spanish? No, the Grammys you see a lot of African American, Latino, Asian, you see everything. That tells me that the union is only representing white people. And 10% is maybe a little bit of African. And so the union also has to fix that problem and to bring more people of color, more Black people, more Latinos into the union. And that is because of racism, and it goes back a long time when the union was segregated. There was a Black union and a white union, which is what I know, Hudson, you're doing a little work on. The unions were segregated, and that really has never totally been repaired. That's still a problem that is structural to why we have these big discrepancy in white and minorities.
Yo voy a aprovechar un poco eso que ha hablado a respeito das segregações que ocorrem em United States sobre latinos e pessoas, black peoples, pessoas negras. No Brasil não era muito diferente, pero acá temos uma população negra muito grande, né? Bien maior que a população branca. Pero os direitos são muito diferentes, as possibilidades também são muito diferentes. Para cá, em algumas instituições musicais, por exemplo, orquestra, temos concursos, seleções, onde temos uma parcela para pessoas negras poderem participar. Como era isso em United States? Tem alguma política, alguma regra para que pessoas negras possam também participar? Ou tem alguma política pensando sobre isso?
See, ahora sí. Now, yes. Now the orchestras are trying more. And George Floyd, what happened here in the United States with George Floyd, really pushed this problem more into the front of the conversation. Because before this, and for many years, the union has always been very silent on discrimination, and because the union is basically all white people. You know, I'm the first person who's of color to be the president of the union, to be on the national board. And so, you know, it's always been a lot of old white men and some old white women who were the leadership of the union. And so the union has never really said, we need to fight for more Black people and more Latinos. They never got involved. I tried, and when I was president in one of my terms, to try and push this, and I did very little bit, but it's a big problem. A big problem like this. Before that, what the union was doing was, well, we don't discriminate, and we don't want the orchestra to discriminate. So we want to have more Black people, more Latinos. So they put a screen in the audition, so you can't see if it's a man or a woman. When they go to the orchestra and they have a violin opening, or you cannot, the panel, the judges, they can't see the musician. It's a screen. And so the playing is, they only hear the sound, right? And some orchestras, the audition will always be behind the screen. So even the final decision, when the conductor comes in and says, okay, I want number 2, they don't know if it's a woman, they don't know if it's Black, they don't know if it's white. But so that is good. Supposedly it's no discrimination. The problem is that classical music training to learn play violin, cello in Brazil, and I know a lot of Latin American, European countries, the government has money for the orchestra. So the Sao Paulo Symphony or the Rio de Janeiro Symphony, maybe the government or the municipality is paying. Like in Argentina too, the municipality pays. So the little kids hopefully will be able to learn violin because the government has these programs in the schools, or hopefully they will have programs. In the United States, we have nothing. So the only kids that learn to play violin, cello, or a trumpet or a trombone or any of those instruments are the ones who have families with money, who are usually the white people who afford to get a private violin teacher or a private trumpet. And so they bring the kid in at 5 years old to play violin. And by the time they're 15, they're really good because they've been playing all the time. Black kids, no, they don't give them anything. I mean, maybe and when you're 10 years old, they give you a little flute, a plastic one to learn how to play something. But what happened in the United States is when they started cutting the budgets for the schools, the first thing they cut is music and then art. You know, they always take away the arts first, and then they just leave the boring stuff, the math and everything. And so there's no arts in the schools. The poor schools don't have arts. And so even though they put the screen, they're never going to have a black person. It's going to be very difficult for the black person to get there because they didn't learn to play when they were very small. So this is a problem now that a lot of nonprofits, and I do some work too in this area, is to bring programs like Gustavo Dudamel, do you know, and Simon Bolivar Orchestra, you know, like putting programs into the poor community to teach the kids to play violin, cello, all these instruments so that if they want to be a professional musician, they know how to play and have an opportunity. But yeah, it's a big problem. And even now, some orchestras, Los Angeles Philharmonic, New York Philharmonic, Boston Symphony, they have programs to bring more African-American students and Latino students into the orchestra. They call them fellowship programs where they pay them a salary and they pay for their living expenses. And that is starting to help a little bit, but it's hard to find the qualified students because they, you know, a lot of the Black and Latino kids, families don't have the money for the private teaching. So.
Entonces, una última pregunta, John. Algunas cosas que nos cuentas son parecidas a lo que pasa aquí en Brasil, otras no. ¿Cómo ves la situación internacional, las diferencias entre Europa, Estados Unidos y los países latinoamericanos para el trabajo de los músicos?
Good question. Well, I feel like the United States has some very good things in that not a lot of countries have these agreements with the record companies. So like in Europe, they don't have a union contract with Warner Brothers, or from what I understand, the workers are more independent. They can work for the record company, but there are a lot of from what I understand, and I don't know because I'm not European, the contracts in the United States are stronger than the European ones when it comes to the ability of the union to negotiate the salaries. But I think that like England versus the United States, the musicians in England are more unionized. There's more musicians in the union in England than there are in the United States, comparing it to based on the population of the country. So the union in England has a lot of members compared to the United States if you do the percentage to the population. I don't know if you understand me, if I'm making sense. So I feel like the U.S. is behind in terms of having enough representation in the sector of the musicians. Latin America, I feel, and I don't want to say this in any way negatively, but I feel like the record companies that work in the United States and work in Europe, they take more advantage of the workers. And because they can get away with more. So that is very frustrating when you see like a Warner Brothers treating someone in you know, I don't know, Buenos Aires very differently than someone in Miami. You know, it's like, well, if I work in Miami, I'm getting paid good money, and if I work in Buenos Aires, I'm getting not good money. So I think the exploitation of the companies in Latin America is, to me, still a problem. But there are some interesting laws. I know that Argentina passed a law recently that gave them more power to make the nightclubs, the live shows, more protected, and also guarantee the musicians payment in the nightclubs, is what I understand. So there are some interesting laws that are coming out of certain Latin American countries that I think the United States can learn from too. There are certain things that have happened that I think, the U.S. is behind in certain ways. Also because in Argentina, and I think in Brazil, maybe not in Brazil, they have a better health system. Like they have a better health insurance, obra social. You know, they have national health program. In the United States, we don't have that. So in the United States, a musician, you will have a famous jazz musician who worked with, you know, Duke Ellington and Miles Davis, and somebody who should be who should live with dignity and be able to die in dignity, living on the street like a homeless person because they don't have enough money to pay for their dialysis or medical issues or medicine. The system in the United States doesn't protect the workers. So if you don't have a private pension or retirement, you can die on the street. And we see that very sad stories where you see a musician who should be, you know, they should be, you know, kissing their feet because they made so much amazing music history. They die like a poor person on the street. And that's horrible. So that's a big problem, I think, in the United States.
Acá es misma cosa.
Sim?
Hay alguna otra cosa que gostaria de decir que nos preguntamos para encerrarmos esta charla?
No, I think we covered a lot. Thank you for your interest and good luck. I think, you know, Brazil, when I was there with you, Luciana, and knowing how strong the music is all across Brazil, I think out of Latin America, I think Brazil has so much possibilities to be a leader in the region, to grow. Obviously, it's a lot of work, and you know, you need a good government. Like now, I have Lula. Hopefully, that's going to be better. It already is better, I know for sure. But taking the opportunity to work with the government to improve the situation, I think Brazil can be a big leader for all Latin America. So I think it's an exciting thing, but it's a lot of work, and you know, it's not easy. So good luck.
Thank you very much, John. Are you playing the cavaquinho? You still playing?
Yeah, I've been trying to learn, but I've been on the road. I've been traveling a lot, so I can only bring one instrument. So I know. So now it's in Buenos Aires. So I go back to Argentina now in 2 weeks. So now I go back to practicing.
Very good. Okay, yeah. John, thank you very much. I hope to see you again very soon.
Yeah, same here. Nice meeting you. See you in Brazil. Yeah. All right.
Thanks a lot. I hope so. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.